So fiction came of age, or it gained acceptance as a form of writing, which we know as the novel, only when it became realistic. When the element of realism became a part of writing fiction or the novel. What does this realism mean? Realism means when there are ordinary characters in ordinary life-like situations speaking in a commonplace language or prosaic language, and they mirror reality or life. So we understand that a novel has to be realistic, though there are other forms of writing novels, there are other genres, but let us accept novel as a kind of writing in prose which mirrors reality. So from its inception, broadly speaking, from 1740 onwards, the novel has mirrored reality, the society and the life of its time, and the period in which it was written. So down the centuries, from the second half of the 18th century, the entire 19th century, the 20th century, and at present, novel is a reflection of reality, of real life, of people and their lives as they live it in ordinary circumstances, in everyday situations. Opposed to it is the element of fantasy. Fantasy is supposed to be unrealistic, featuring unrealistic characters with the element of romance, which is again opposed to reality. And reality has been the stronger trend, and it has been the foremost form or the essential element of novel writing. Fantasy involves imagination. It is a kind of escapism, and it is generally considered as not the mainstream novel writing. So fantasy involves romance and imagination, while realism means reality and true to life situations, characters, conversations, events, plots, storyline, whatever. So what I would like to emphasize is that reality has changed with each time, with each generation. At the present, from the 20th century onwards and the beginning of modern literature, reality has been sordid, it is unpalatable, it has created an ugliness in life and in experience, and all the fiction writing, whether it is in the form of short stories or novel, is mirroring that reality. Now, fantasy, does it always have to be unrealistic? If we analyze it carefully, don't we find the elements of reality there as well? Of course, it depicts an unrealistic world, maybe a fantastic world, maybe a world which does not really exist. But fantasy is also something which has a grain of truth. Fantasy does not have to be a kind of an idealized world. Even writing which is dystopia, which is the form of dystopia, which it can be futuristic, is also fantasy. So dystopia, a word which has become synonymous with uh, tension of living, with the almost nihilistic possibilities of the modern civilization. Dystopia also involves fantasy, right from Swift's Gulliver's Travels to the modern day classic of dystopia, that is Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. So fantasy does not always depict a beautiful fairy tale like world full of romance and impossible wish fulfillment. It also creates a reflection of almost nihilistic proportions of the existential anguish and the almost a crisis-like situation which might become the possibility of the future. So fantasy can exhibit dystopia. It does not always have to be a picture of a beautiful world. And if we look at those works of fantasy, or especially the fairy tales, which we always associate with some kind of unrealistic world, a world of impossible beauty. But if we look at the characters, not only the fairy tales, but also let us take the nursery rhymes or the fables of Panchtantra. Don't those characters also face an existential dilemma, an existential anguish, an identity crisis, a suffering, a pain, uncertainty, and doubt? Let us take the characters from the fairy tales. The Little Mermaid suffers unimaginable pain. So do Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. And Snow White lives a life under a curse. Most of her life is because she is under the spell of the wicked godmother. The Ugly Duckling, who turns into a beautiful swan, because after all it's a fairy tale, is also a small child. We can compare that small duckling to the characters from Dickens's novels, where the unloved child is all alone and full of a misery which nobody understands, nobody in the adult world. Similarly, let us look at the fables. Though they live in an utopian world, they do have their own share of pain and loneliness, like and of course enmity, like the story of this stork and the his friend, or rather his frenemy, the fox, and how he plays a trick on him when he invites him for dinner. We also see crisis solving in the way the crow manages to drink water by filling the pitcher with stones. We also have stories of betrayal, when the goldsmith betrays the man who helped him to pull him out of the well. And of course the stories tell us a philosophy, but they also express the negative emotions which are a part of the human world. Nursery rhymes, as we all know, they are an expression of the dissatisfaction and the agony, we can say, and the violence, as well as the injustice which people faced in the medieval ages and down the centuries because of the draconian laws which the kings, who were despots, all passed at the cost of the common people who were living in great poverty. So the nursery rhymes exhibit that sense of poverty, that sense of injustice, that feeling of being deprived in a cruel system very, very clearly. The Arabian Nights portray the injustice of a very patriarchal society, a very medieval society, but then again we have strong women in these stories. Women like Margina, who saves her master from the robbers, and we also have the rags to riches story. We are also taught to, or we rather see how what appears is actually not the truth in many of these fairy tales. We see the essential grain of human experience and human life. So the lines between fantasy and reality are fluid, we might say, and if a fantasy is expressed in fiction or in writing, it does not mean that it is completely contrary to reality. Thank you.